somebody asks me, doctor, what should I do? I say, I can't answer that question for you, because what's right for you is going to be based on your life. It's going to be based on your values. It's going to be based on your ideas, whether or not you have a spirituality. It's going to be based on the experiences that you've gone through. I can't make a major decision like that for you, because if I was in your place, I might choose something completely different from what feels right to you, because my choices are going to be based on my spirituality and my lived experiences and what is of value to me. So we can't trade places.
Welcome back to the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast. This week, Augustine's guest is none other than the Dr. K. Dr. K starts off by sharing a bit about how she started on social media, her background in the birth world, how her grandfather's career and naturopathy impacted her. Together, Augustine and Dr. K dive into barriers within obstetrics to getting midwifery more exposure, informed consent and autonomy, a bit on the history of obstetrics, and why having more women in the field hasn't made enough of a change. You can find Dr. K anywhere on social media at Dr. K Pregnancy Specialist to hear more of her wisdom. Let's dive in.
So amazing to meet you. Thank you again for being willing to chat with us. Well, Dr. K, I've been following you for a bit on social media, and I'm so impressed. You're just blowing my mind. And I just thought it would be amazing to connect and build more of these connections. As you know, midwifery and obstetrics have been these siloed organizations that kind of have a lot of animosity, and there's just no reason for that. It's like kind of an antiquated way of being. And at Midwifery Wisdom, we really want to build those bridges and unite those silos. And one way we do that is by getting to know each other and really hearing perspective. And social media connects us so brilliantly. So this is one way that we can have a window into each other's lives. And you are actively posting on social media, and your audience seems to be mostly parents, but you know you have a lot of midwife followers because of how much you're breaking boundaries and really being a truth teller. So how did this all get started? Who are you? Where are you? What happened? Tell us the story.
Sure. So actually, I think I'd have to go and check, but I have the suspicion actually that probably the largest group of people that follow me might be doulas.
Okay.
They might be doulas. I have a fair number of doulas following me. When I started to look at some of the account names, I'm like, oh, that actually might be who's really following me are the doulas. Which I got started on social media, producing content for pregnancy, maternity, postpartum, mostly because I was building a separate business with a partner of mine, and we were going to offer some professional webinars and content on different topics. And I thought, well, if nobody knows who I am, then they wouldn't come and attend a paid webinar of my expertise being shared.
Right.
So I thought, well, if I'm going to be one of these people that offers services or that does paid content, then people have to know who I am. And so that started my getting launched on social media. And it really has been a little bit of an experiment and kind of a lesson to me, and kind of learning who likes the kind of information that I have, and also recognizing my difference and what I bring differently compared to some of my peers in either obstetrics or in high-risk obstetrics. Maternal fetal medicine is the other name for it. And recognizing that the things that I'm very, very much passionate about, advocacy for our rights as birthing individuals, as parents, passing information to that individual that's going to be at the receiving end of medical care in a straightforward and simple way, not in a way that just gets applause from my peers, but in a way that communicates to people that don't have this advanced knowledge and training, don't have these degrees, don't work in these professions, not speaking in code and a niche, but speaking in like common language. So I started to realize that I have some differences in kind of the information that I would put out there, and how I would present certain topics. And then I also really just started to listen. It really started kind of opening myself up to the voices of midwives, of doulas, of individual parents who were sharing their stories, and also lactation counselors, birth advocates. I didn't just follow and listen to peers. And as I have listened to people that are not my peers, people that are on the receiving end of medical care, it has changed me a little bit. It has allowed me, it's been an education in like an educational experience for me. And I think it's been powerful. It's helped me refine my perspective on different things by listening and learning, and then examining what I've been taught, what culture I was trained in, and whether or not there are parts of that culture that I think are still have value, or whether or not there are parts of that culture that really make me cringe as I reflect on it kind of anew. So that's kind of how I got started on social media. I was trained in a program that I really respect in obstetrics and gynecology. So I am an obstetrician gynecologist. And early on in my training, I attended some births in the hospital with at least one midwife that was a part of OBGYN practice. She was kind of their main midwife. And I thought it was pretty cool to attend some of her deliveries. And I'll give a little bit of a backstory that I think also helps explain why I would even be open to some of that. So my grandfather, my dad's father, got a doctorate of naturopathy when around the time that I was getting ready to enter medical school, around the time I was in college and around the time I was entering medical school, and that period of time, he got a doctorate of naturopathy. And I had never heard of naturopathy before, but this was my grandfather. And so he started talking to me about chemistry and about biology and about physiology, organic chemistry. And he spoke about it like it was like he was like fluent in it. And he broke down concepts better than probably many of the professors that I had learned some of these ideas from in undergraduate school. And so I was like, oh my gosh, my grandfather is brilliant. I've never heard somebody talk science like this in this way and really connect all these dots. And what is naturopathy? So, and then, so he had a store that he opened up. My family's from Jamaica. So he opened up a store in like the major capital city of Jamaica, selling herbs and vitamins and supplements and bringing in, like, trying to just introduce this concept in a greater, with a greater reach within that capital city. And so he kind of did this at the right time to get a foot in the door in my mind about being open to alternative things. And so then I went into medical school, and most medical students, depending on where you go to school, what you're exposed to is what you believe in. And so in allopathic medicine, or MDs, we only get exposed for the most part to traditional Western medicine, and that's what we believe in. And then you get like this really cheap exposure to complementary alternative medicine, not in a robust way, for you to believe in it. So a lot of people in medical school are very skeptical because they don't get introduced to complementary medicine in a way that has a lot of kind of like veracity and that feels reliable. It feels sketchy in the way that it's presented. They talk about how there's not that a lot of information, how there aren't great studies. And then you, on the other hand, you get all these other studies about pharmaceuticals and this and that. And you're like, okay, well then why would I trust this? This doesn't have much data behind it. Versus, I think those students that probably come from Eastern cultures where somebody in the family or somebody in the community is practicing Eastern medicine. They believe in it because they've been exposed to it. And so they can get an MD, but they don't throw out the Ayurveda. They don't throw out the Chinese medicine because they've had enough exposure to it that they know that there's validity to that. They know that there's older science. And then they start to realize what funds research and that that's not going to get funded. So you have different camps of people in Western medical training that are going to be very kind of only believe, what they're taught and are going to have limited exposure to other things. And somehow from my grandfather, I got into that camp of people that was going to be mindful and open to things that were beyond what I was going to be taught in school and beyond what I was going to be taught in training, that I realized there were other things that were valid and that warranted my attention and that could teach me something. And it didn't have to be mainstream in order for it to teach me. So then I go into residency and a midwife is like, hey, do you want to join me in some of my deliveries? I'm like, sure, why not? I need to get my OBG. I need to get my delivery numbers. Let's go see what this is about. And then I was like, what are you doing in here? So, I had some births I was a part of where I was like on my knees. I think we had like draping on the ground. We had gloves up to the elbows. This lady's butt cheeks were in my face. And I was like, please just don't fart on me and give me pink eye. But like, as long as I don't get
classic midwifery words right there. That's the classic.
I was like, she was like hovering over the bed, standing up. And I was like, all in. I was like, when am I ever going to get this experience again? This is like a novelty. So I was like one of the few residents that attended multiple deliveries with this one midwife that was a part of an OBGYN group. She was like a regular person that came to our hospital. We got to know her. Everybody respected her. And then we had another midwife that used to work in our triage area. And she was like one of the people that we regularly, interchanged handoffs between. And then when I went to fellowship, we had midwives that worked, for the university group. And we worked with them closely in triage. Then when I was in my attending job, we had a group of midwives that were part of our kind of university practice. So I had been exposed to midwives like from the beginning. And so I interacted with them. We had kind of a fluidity of kind of moving responsibilities from, one group to the next. And the more I encountered midwives and the more I started to, try to understand what they had to offer that was maybe different than what I had to offer, then I started saying, okay, well, can I consult with you on this? If a client that I want to work with, really wants a midwifery type of childbirth experience, like she is going to be harder to get that with an OB. Can we do a collaboration? Can she come and meet with you a few times? And, and maybe would you consider doing her delivery or maybe, help her get engaged in labor prep? So I did that a few times with people, or I did the opposite, and say, oh, well, okay, you have a high risk, you have a condition that has some elevated risk. I think you can stay with your midwife, but let's consult with me a few times. And then, as long as things go fine, then continue to have your midwifery-based prenatal care and your midwifery, planned, intended childbirth. So, so I think I kind of along my path have interacted in a significant way with midwives to have a respect for what they contributed and to not feel like we were competing, but to feel like we had different styles, and like some of the clients were going to want a particular thing and some of them were going to want something else. And I never felt any competition because I had a high risk. So like nobody's competing with me. I don't know how a general OB might consider some of that, but I do feel like we have clients that sometimes just want different things. There are people that want to work with an OB. They want kind of a common experience. And then there are some people that they want a lot more say in what they are going to do and in their choices. And they may want to test themselves and, try something, try going without medication, try different positions. They want to test out things that they read about. And so like they may be better served by a midwife who's got not only kind of the style that fits with that a little bit better, but also has more experience in some of those things. Like a lot of OBGYNs don't really have experience in some of that. So
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of a summary of how I came to be very collaborative with midwives.
Well, it's super awesome. And I love the word that you kept repeating, which is like exposure. And midwives have oftentimes felt that that was the key, that if more obstetric student, medical students or obstetric residents were exposed to midwifery, much like you were saying, it would be like, oh, this does have a place to integrate. It's not either or, right? It's how do we build this bridge? And so the question I think a lot of my colleagues and I have been asking is like, how do we get more exposure? Like, how does this work? As many obstetric units in general are closing, as more and more midwifery departments are being closed or laid off or disbanded or whatever, how do we get to this? There's this great work being done in Philadelphia. I have a good midwife friend who is a professor and manages the resident program at Jefferson, and is having incredible results as a effect of having that really long, integrated, consistent exposure to the midwifery model of care. But how are we going to do this on a global way?
That's a great question. I don't know if I can speak about a global solutions, because I don't think I'm well versed in systems outside of the United States. I've lived in a handful of states now and worked in a handful of different states, so I've seen kind of different models within the U.S. I think there's so many. There are multiple barriers to a better system. And
what do you see on the OB side, I guess? Because I feel like I'm really versed on the barriers on the midwifery side. What do you see on your side?
I think the first thing, in order to train residents, you have to be in the ear of the residency director. And the residency director who sets a curriculum for what the residents need to learn has to value the exposure to midwifery. So that's one. So somehow the person in charge of what they're going to be exposed to and what their competencies has to believe in that. And I think one of the other ways to start kind of that advocacy, because it's very important, is we need the voices of the ladies, the birthing individuals, the parents, to make it to the ear of the general OBGYN department, because birthing individuals are asking for this. But a lot, what I found is that OBs are in kind of their own bubble, and they are not really listening to the feedback that is growing within the community. They're not really perceiving and being attuned to some of the stories and some of the sentiment and the overall feeling that birthing individuals have after getting OB care. They're not hearing. They're tone deaf to it. And that's one of the things that has really taught me a lot. I started to listen on social media. I'm like, wow, we need to hear these voices. And what we hear too much in obstetrics is our own voice. We hear lectures from our peers. We don't hear lectures from doulas. We don't hear lectures from midwives. And like we both acknowledge, exposure is important. We need to hear those voices of people complaining about not having autonomy, how they felt coerced into positions, how they wanted access to midwives and there were none in their region, and that was wrong. How the state laws in their region, or maybe even national or regional laws in different countries that make access to midwifery challenging, how that made them feel, how the data shows that midwifery is a benefit. And
I was going to say, it's not just actually like their experience, it's also the data. Statistics show that obstetrics do not have better outcomes for normal people. And how are we going to get that across. I feel like that is critical to changing the system that is failing so many people.
Yeah, it has to come. It's not going to come from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. It's not going to come from the Royal College, right? It's not going to come from the OBGYN headquarters. It has to come from other people that have sway, that get into these places of discourse. We like grand rounds generally happen on a regular basis at different hospitals. You got to get a grand round speaker that comes in unexpectedly and starts talking about things that they've never heard about because it's outside of the bubble. I remember where one of the places that I've worked, I asked for the founder of VBAC Facts to be invited as a grand round speaker because
Jen Kimmel is amazing. Shout out to Jen. Woo-hoo.
Jen is an expert on the literature of vaginal birth after cesarean. She knows that topic way better than most obstetricians do.
Yep.
And she also knows how individuals who've been affected by this, how they feel, because she's been listening to them for over a decade. And she's been telling their stories. She's been writing about it. She's been sharing. So who better to kind of talk about this from a fresh perspective, not just go over, the things that we've heard and rehash what's in the American College. Let's hear a fresh perspective on this. Let's hear somebody who's a patient advocate and knows the data.
Yeah.
Let's hear about how the intersection of lack of autonomy affects marginalized groups and the rising C-section. Let's hear about that, right?
Yeah.
And nobody ever responded. I was like, hey, I would, the people say, oh, give your suggestions for who you'd like for grand rounds. And I'd love for you to invite Jen Kimmel. This is the web address to her account. This is her email address. Like, she gives these talks, and I really think it would be valuable. But somehow I think usually a chairperson of an OBGYN department is highly influential in kind of the direction that a department will go. And
that's how these echo chambers get formed, really. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, that is an ongoing challenge that we will continue to take up the charge. Dr. K, one of the things that I just was so, I think, shocked about when I started digging into your content was your continued and thoughtful and challenging verbiage about informed decision-making and sovereign authority over the birthing body. And it's so refreshing. And I'm sure you're not immune to the statistics of coercion and obstetric control and obstetric violence and real unethical informed consent realities that are happening in the medical world. And you are so eloquent in your way of just, it's obvious to anyone who knows, but it felt like there might be a way that you're doing it that is really opening eyes. And I wonder if you've had any feedback from colleagues who heard your content and been like, I never thought about it that way. Oh, wow. Like, have you had any of that feedback yet?
No.
No.
Damn it. I do have some OBGYNs that do follow my account and that do like some of my content. Let me take back that no. On a whole, I would say it's a no. I think I had one social media person that I do not know personally, okay. But that we follow each other, that did make a comment about one of my posts that did fairly well and was about autonomy, that said, this is a great point. Thank you for bringing this up, something to that extent. But I do still think that people are watching and people are listening. And I had a student organization start tagging and putting hashtags to some of my stuff and resharing. And I was like, oh, thank you for doing that. I've had some students and people intending to go into residency kind of reach out to me. And so I think I think as I add some of those hashtags for trainees and students, that it kind of gets out there. And I see people more likely to like than to comment. I think people are, but I think the message is coming across. And there's more I'm going to do on that because I feel really strongly that we don't have to coerce people in order to get them to accept our recommendations. I feel very strongly that we know in part. We don't know the whole story. We don't know what's best for everyone. And I practice exactly how I post because I tell people, if somebody asks me, Doctor, what should I do? I say, I can't answer that question for you because what's right for you is going to be based on your life. It's going to be based on your values. It's going to be based on your ideas, whether or not you have a spirituality. It's going to be based on the experiences that you've gone through. I can't make a major decision like that for you because if I was in your place, I might choose something completely different from what feels right to you because my choices are going to be based on my spirituality and my lived experiences and what is of value to me. So we can't trade places. And I think another part is that a lot of times, a fair number of times, physicians can be really pessimistic. And it's important for us to be mindful of the worst thing that can happen and to potentially be prepared for that. But we have to caution ourselves to not present a rare worst case scenario as something that happens all the time. And so I think that there are so many things that I think that maybe when a peer like me starts to chip away at things that we do that we shouldn't be doing, chip away at things that are hypocritical, will champion abortion rights and undermine birth rights, right? Birth plan rights, will champion access to contraception, will undermine autonomy when it comes to childbirth and prenatal care. Like we're both ends of the sword. It's like, no, is it autonomy or is it not? Like you can't say you don't want the government involved in these decisions and then you undermine and disrespect and mistreat and do not support autonomy. And we are supposed to be champions of their choice and for all of it. And even if
it's amazing. It's reproductive health compared to choices in childbirth. It seems like the obstetrics has pulled them apart like they're separate entities. Yeah. When you're making such a good point. Choice is choice. Autonomy is autonomy.
Choice is choice. Yeah. And you know what? I think I said this either I wrote about it or expressed it that I think the Jehovah's Witnesses have something to teach us. If we will listen to it and if we will apply it to other situations, they have something to teach us about respecting choice, even if it adds risk. I've had someone that was a patient who we were consulting on them who absolutely refused a transfusion, even though it was going to be life-saving, and they passed away. And it is a hard thing to swallow, but we all knew the right decision was to support their choice, even if their choice had extra risks, even if their choice was going to put them in danger. And I think somehow when it comes
And was there a religious component in that story?
The Jehovah's Witness? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. But I love this link you're making now. It's like we knew it was the right choice there because of an established tenet and respect around religion.
Yeah.
But how do we lose that respect when it's just a person, right? Is that the idea?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't think it matters whether it's religion or not, but somehow that's what we give the value to. It doesn't matter because the science says the blood transfusion is going to be life-saving. So it doesn't matter if it's religion or just your ideas,
philosophy or opinion.
Whatever it is, you have decided, no, I do not want this. And even if it puts me at risk, I still say no. And we have to respect that. But then once you add a viable fetus into the mix, The unviable fetus will champion abortion rights all the way up the hill, right? But once you put a viable fetus in there, especially if we think you could sue us, now your rights go out the window. Now it's, I tell you what's best, because if you don't listen to me, your baby's going to be at risk. And in my mind, you're going to sue me. So I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to give you options. These are the things to do. There are no alternatives. That's how it gets presented. You have to be in this position. You have to do these things. If you don't, your baby's going to die. That's how it gets presented. And it's wildly out of proportion. It's still disrespectful of autonomy. It's still unethical. It's wrong. And we don't see it as wrong as a specialty. We don't see it as wrong because we're so hyper-focused on this baby who's not ours. That baby still belongs to that mom. And that parent still has autonomy over what happens before that baby is born. And somehow, once they become viable, our minds code switch. And
that's so fascinating.
Right? We just code switch. As soon as they become viable, all of a sudden, we're just like the government. You should have no rights over your body. We should be able to say what's best.
And it's ludicrous. Like when you say it like this, it's totally ludicrous. But as a society, we have decided that the baby's life somehow is more valuable than the person in whose body it is. And certainly there's debate about that at the beginning of pregnancy, but there is an extreme bias at the end of pregnancy. Yeah. I mean, even so much now that there are cesarean court orders being ordered for people that are refusing cesarean, that are being forced to have cesarean with because it was medically necessary or whatever. There's all manner of obstetric violence and coercion happening because getting that baby out alive seems to be more important than treating the person respectfully, And this is happening certainly all over the United States. And this is the challenge that the doulas are witnessing, which is why they're so enamored with your content. And this is, I think, a real foundational bedrock problem in the United States healthcare system. Australia is having a similar problem with the advance of Western obstetrics all over the globe. It's happening everywhere. I'm in India, same problem. Obstetric violence is rampant. And Australia, though, has made a concerted effort to research this problem. There's been a number of studies come out on obstetric violence and listening to mothers type studies. And then Hannah Dahlen and colleagues wrote that really seminal book called Birthing Outside the System, The Canary in the Coal Mine. I don't know if you've seen it, but this one, it outlines what happens when women encounter this kind of hardline reality is they eventually opt out of the system entirely. Absolutely. And so the rise of not just home births assisted by midwives, but the rise of unassisted birth, free birth, and the ensuing complications from those choices are a direct result of this kind of environment inside the hospital. I'm sure you're aware of this rising free birth movement.
Yeah, I posted about my response to free birth. It got a lot of attraction. Then I posted after reading the comments, and I said, I wonder if my colleagues in OB understand, if they're aware that they are directly involved in the rising number of free births and that people are rejecting obstetrics because they have been traumatized and that is directly involved. Do we know that? And that got a lot of attraction too. So sure. No, I don't. I think we're tone deaf in OB. I think we do not recognize. We're not hearing the surveys of people after they have had childbirth in different. One, surveys aren't always being kind of disseminated in a systematic way, but I think New York State had a very concerning survey response where the overwhelming majority of people were not pleased with their childbirth experience in a survey that went out within a particular region of New York. That we need that kind of information coming back. And so we're tone deaf. We're not hearing these concerns. People are not listening, and they're just doing what they've always been taught to do. it's a problem. And then the other part of it is that what we've been taught to do comes from a period where women didn't have agency. And so we're continuing to practice things that were born from a time when women didn't have agency. And one of the things that I'm going to post about, I've written it in the comments, but it deserves its own reel or something. I talk about how, Western obstetrics kind of has had a significant impact on obstetrics across the world. So Western gynecology started first, and then kind of obstetrics came following that. And it started as a white male field that gave access to prominence within society. It was a way to become somebody of prominence. And then in the United States, we had these budding gynecologists that were experimenting and performing surgeries to make names for themselves and to write papers on African slaves. And then as well on poor Irish women and other marginalized women that couldn't say no to things, that didn't have anybody advocating for them. So then you move forward, but obstetrics was born like as this kind of field that took over midwifery to say, no, we know what we're doing. It was kind of the new kid on the block, but it said, oh no, what midwives are doing is unsanitary and is it something that we want to support? So we're going to take it over, and we're going to remove, especially in the United States, we're going to move the Black granny midwives who've been doing this for generations, who probably brought this knowledge from the African continent and have been passing it down. And we're instead going to lift up this white male-dominated field of obstetrics and gynecology, and then also white female nurse midwives that we certify. But we're going to kind of marginalize other groups. And it was born out of a time where there was misogyny, lack of access to bodily autonomy, and lack of agency, lack of the female vote. And then over time, we've now come to a place where there are a significant number of women in the field, and yet it's still not better. It's not better. We've dramatically changed the face of obstetrics. It's no longer male-dominated in the United States, and it's still not better. And now the question is, why? Why can we have the majority of residents in obstetrics be women, and it's not better? Because which women are they? Are they the marginalized women who are going to champion, hey, give me autonomy? I come from people who were abused. I come from people who've been marginalized. I come from people who say, I don't have any say in whether or not I have a C-section. I'm the one who's dying at a higher rate. I'm the one that's on the insurance and getting the worst of the care. I'm the one going to these hospitals and getting mistreated. Are those the people that are in high numbers in obstetrics? No, they're not. It's privileged white women who have not abandoned the roots of the past. They've not kind of been aware of what needs to be weeded out. And sometimes you need the others to come along and say, don't you see what's going on here? Hey, this got to change. We got to get rid of that. That past is not good. That past is ugly. It does not help anyone. Sometimes you need the marginalized who see things differently to come along and expose what other people somehow have had the privilege not to see. And that's the current state of affairs. We have a predominant field of white women in obstetrics now, and yet things are not dramatically different.
Gosh. Ugh. Your voice is so important, Dr. K.
Thank you.
It's so important. Your experience, your history, your exposure, your voice is so important. You need to go do those ground rounds. How do we nominate you?
People have to want to hear it, but you know what? Change is coming. Change is coming.
So too. There are signs on the horizon in a lot of places. There are some really confirming realities as well. We're still in a dark reality, but there's some light for sure.
I think social media has been very powerful in this area.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I think the power of a normal person to have a voice and to have an audience and to share their stories across their region and the world in ways that could go viral is powerful. It's powerful. And the day is coming when the institutions and the status quo in medicine will not be able to ignore it. It's coming because social media is so powerful at amplifying the voice of even the average person who can speak of their own experience, and it resonates with another person, and then they share it, and then they share it, and they share it, and they share it. And before you know it, everybody's talking about it. And you don't have to be somebody who has a degree. You don't have to have expertise in the area. You just have to share something that resonates with somebody else. And then all of a sudden, everybody's talking about it. And so it's coming.
Yeah.
It is coming.
I actually talked about this at last year's conference as my keynote. It's at my opening statements. It's the fourth currency, right? So we started with labor, which was exploited for centuries. And then there was money. And then there was code. And now the fourth currency is audience. Because it's the most egalitarian currency we've ever had. Because like you said, anyone, anywhere with an internet and a phone can have an audience and can change the world and can leverage that audience and can literally do things we've never been able to do. And I agree. There's lots of downsides to the social media reality too. But if we look at it on the whole, we are having a paradigm shift, a power shift as a result of this tool for sure.
Yes.
And a connection, like even this connection right now, connections that happen as a result of this access, which we never had before. It does increase access. And I think there are some bright lights. But gosh, I want it to happen faster.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure you do too.
Absolutely. Yeah, but change is often slow, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in medicine. What do they say? 22 years for a study to become practice.
Yes, I think at least 10.
Yeah. Well, I'm inspired by what you're doing, and at the risk of I don't think you'll be offended, but I would say a lot of what you're doing or what you're speaking about, you say you also practice the same way. A lot of what you're doing then is actually grounded in the midwifery model of care. And I wonder if there's any way that we can, because for instance, what's happening when leaders such as yourself center choice and center authority and agency and sovereignty and center this, like the patient, the client is centered. When you do that is the midwifery model of care. And so in a lot of ways, you're not having to reinvent anything. These OBs who might want to become more humanistic in their care, they don't have to reinvent anything. It already exists. They just have to stop seeing it as the enemy.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't have to be reinvented. This is medical ethics. In my current medical teaching, we talk about ethics. I remember when I attended medical school, I graduated in 2010. So I was in school from 2006 to 2010. That's over, almost 20 years ago that I started. And I was being taught for days on medical ethics. It was like a tenet of some of the early teachings. One of the principles of ethics is autonomy. This is not, creating some new concept.
No,
it's reminding people what we are supposed to be doing. And one of the barriers that really has to be addressed in order to, I think, get more people to let go of their grip on making decisions is the malpractice climate. And I don't know how it relates in India, Australia, or other places, but in the United States, it's major. It's major. And so if you've had someone as an OB that's been sued for a fetal death, actually, it's not the fetal deaths that they get sued for. That's major. It's the newborn injuries. It's the catastrophic newborn injury where the claim, where the, what you're suing for is in the millions of dollars. Those are the ones that change obstetricians. And
Yeah.
it changes the obstetricians who are defending those cases, whether or not they win them. And it changes their peers who hear the rumors about what so-and-so went through. And so then you have people say, I don't trust this mom. I hear what she's saying. She has no clue how bad this can get if both shoes drop. She's read this birth plan. She doesn't understand what it means. And if her baby has a catastrophic injury, she's absolutely going to sue me. I don't care what she says. So no, I'm not going along with this plan because I don't trust that if she experiences an outcome, that she's not going to sue me for going along with her plan. That's a major part of it. And we have to find a way to get, in the US, the courts to acknowledge when people have acknowledged risks, no matter what happens. We have to do some kind of remediation of the malpractice kind of arena. It's out of control. And
it would change a lot if there was some kind of valid fund for those families that existed in the public sphere. Like if they didn't have to get money to actually pay for their kid to stay alive.
You're saying, yeah. Like if there was universal health care and you didn't
that's what that is. That's what that's called. Oh,
if you have to sue the doctor in order to get funds for the physical therapy or the lifelong care for your
That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair to the doctor to get sued when they did the things that they were supposed to do. But you're right. Now, when you have this system where it's like, okay, well, I don't have the money to take care of this kid. I got to get money from somewhere. So
honestly, I think that is behind the lawsuits that continue, right? The initial that reaction, that knee-jerk, litigious reaction exists across all cultures. But the persistent, I'm going to work at this to get everything I can, that is not actually grief or shock and awe. That is survival. I don't know how to do this without major support. And the government doesn't give it. The United States government does not give any support for healthcare. And so, they're in crisis. Well, gosh, I have so many things running through my head. This is such a fun and amazing conversation. I so enjoy learning from you and talking with you. I hope we can do it again somehow. When you think of the future and your path, what are you charting? What are you really excited about that's coming your way, and what are you headed towards next, if you're willing to share?
That's a great question. I really do want to get to the place where I am sharing information in a significant way. And so I still want to get to the place where I'm creating really good takeaway videos on different topics that people experience, especially in the realm of pregnancy complications, because I frequently hear comments from people that are pregnant that nobody's talking to me. They've got a complication going on and nobody has kind of explained what the scenario is. They aren't sure who's involved with it. They don't have trust because nobody's communicating with them. And then even when somebody does speak to them, they speak over their head at a level that they don't understand. And one of the things that I think I do fairly well is to keep things in straightforward language, to kind of make sense out of things that are complicated, not by talking down, but by using language that people understand and talking through the complexities in a way that everybody can follow along. And so I really would like to get to the place where I've got videos on a lot of different complications and things that happen, and like the common uncertainties that come up for these different scenarios that people can share and learn from, because we don't do enough education on the obstetric side. Midwifery does a much better job of informing that pregnant individual that's getting care through a midwife about what to expect, but often it's, the goal is what to expect of your typical pregnancy, your typical childbirth, how to prepare for breastfeeding. It's if things go well, this is how to be prepared for that. And then for the OBGYN model, there's almost no significant transfer of information that happens for those pregnant individuals getting prenatal care with an obstetrician. And when things are not going well, they're in a knowledge desert. They have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, you are handicapped to be able to really speak up for yourself and to really be able to make decisions for yourself and to.
Well, yeah, if you don't know about your options, you don't have choices at all, actually.
Right. If you don't understand the scenario, you're at the mercy of your providers. And I don't believe in that. And so I really think that it's important to share information and to try and elevate the understanding of the pregnant population. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping to do.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. And so it's actually such a global mission. Like that is needed.
It's not just for the US. Yeah, no, it's not just there.
That's needed everywhere, but especially in the US, it feels like a really powerful place to start because so many other cultures and countries are informed by what's happening in the US. And so that feels like a really amazing mission. And yeah, I'm cheering for you.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. K, this was awesome. Where can people follow you? Where can they find out more about you?
Oh, thank you. So one, I've enjoyed being a guest on your podcast. Thank you for reaching out. This was a great conversation. I am Dr. K, pregnancy specialist on a few different platforms, active on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Eventually, we'll hopefully have some things on YouTube. That's where I'm hoping to get some of my longer content out for education. So
that's an awesome social media goal. I'm cheering. Well, we will link all of those in the show notes below. This will appear on YouTube. So once you get that established, let us know. We'll tag back to you. And we'll just keep following and cheering for you and hope to talk you into coming to conference some year. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.